If you want to learn more about the formulas and theories I use when I analyze companies, go check my website whatinvest.com. There is a link in the description of this video.
Have you ever wondered how one of the biggest companies around was founded? How it became a billion-dollar company in a matter of a few years? And more importantly, who was the man behind this company? My name is Jesus Montesinos, and today I'm gonna talk about Steve Jobs, written by Walter Isaacson. Ya hay la intro. Música. No, nothing going to talk. This is the second time that I read this book. I remember the first time I read it, it was on my graduation day from high school, and it was a gift from my parents. That time, I read the book and I wasn't that much impressed about it. And I have to say that 4 years later, I have learned much more about the company, about Apple. This book is a biography of Steve Jobs. It covers his entire life from the moment he was born until unfortunately he died in 2011. You will read very interesting stories. For example, why did he drop out of college? How were the first days with Steve Wozniak at Steve Jobs' garage? How they started Apple? How is that they found investors to believe in their company, because otherwise Apple couldn't have existed. Also, one of my favorite stories, and probably if you're into the business industry, you have read about or you know about John Sculley. He was the president of Apple at the time. This was in the 80s. It was Steve Jobs versus John Sculley. And that was the reason why Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, got kicked out of his own company. It's not common to see that. Usually founders, they just resign from the company and that's it, but not that they are kicked out of it. So it's very interesting his story. In the book you will see what Steve Jobs did while he was out of Apple, and then the comeback to his company. When Steve Jobs was out of Apple, he founded Next, another computer company but with other business targets, and also he invested in Pixar. So thanks to Steve Jobs, we have Toy Story, we have The Incredibles, we have Finding Nemo. So yes, I owe Steve Jobs a lot of my childhood, because I really enjoyed those movies, and now as well. You will read about Steve Jobs' life and Apple, especially Apple. Also how the iPod was developed, how that idea got into Steve's mind and it got into reality. How did they start making the iPhone? All the products, all the, let's say, the big products that Apple produced, you will read the story of it in this book. Why I recommend you to read this biography? Two main reasons. The first one is because I believe it's important to know, or it's useful to know the story of companies, because probably it will motivate you to start your own company. For example, Apple started in a garage, and you will see that it's not impossible to start a billion-dollar company from scratch. So as it's the story about Steve Jobs, it's as the same with the company. It's useful to know about this guy, because being honest, Steve Jobs was one of the most influential people of the last 100 years, and without him we couldn't have the phones we have, the computers we have, the tablets we have now. And I'd say that it's very interesting to learn about his life, because probably you will learn a lot from him. And the second reason, and probably most important, it's because it will help you in analyzing Apple. We as investors, it's very important to know how companies were founded, because that will help us in see if the company is still working and is still doing business according to its founders' beliefs. For example, let's take Apple. Apple believes, according to Steve Jobs, in challenging the status quo, in challenging industries, in making great products. The only way to know about that is by reading about Steve Jobs. Because usually what the founder believes, the company believes the same. Usually, there are some exceptions as well. But in the case of Apple, it's not. Because Steve Jobs and Apple, they have the same beliefs, or at least that's what I interpret of the company. If you read this book, you will understand how Apple works, how they develop products, how they get into new industries, and that will help you a lot as an investor, because now I can understand why Apple is in the phone industry rather than in the television industry. You will understand much better the decisions that this company makes. You can do the same with other companies. Another great example would be Nike. Its founder, Phil Knight, he wrote an autobiography called Shoe Dog, and you can understand the same. If you want to analyze Nike, I could highly recommend you to read Shoe Dog, because you will understand Nike much better than just by reading analyst reports, because the ideal person to tell you about the company, it's its founder, and in this case Steve Jobs. I think it's the best person that can tell you how Apple works, only if you believe that the company hasn't changed. Okay, so yes, I highly encourage you to read Steve Jobs by Walter Isaacson, because you will not regret it. You will learn a lot, not just about Apple and Steve Jobs, but probably about life, because probably you will learn things that could be useful to your future company. That's it. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.